The call to 911 was frantic, a mother's voice shattered by panic. It was the morning after Christmas 1996 in Boulder, Colorado. A ransom note was found, demanding $118,000 for the return of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey. But what began as a kidnapping would soon become a haunting murder mystery, a crime scene so badly bungled that the truth may never be known. This is a story of wealth, a beautiful home turned into a chamber of horrors, and an investigation divided against itself. Was the killer a stranger who slipped into the night, or was the truth hiding in plain sight all along? If you're ready to uncover the facts, subscribe to Lost Traces and hit the like button to support our investigation into this unspeakable crime. The final hours of Christmas Day, 1996, unfolded with festive normalcy for the Ramsey family of Boulder, Colorado. John Ramsey, a wealthy business executive, his wife Patsy, a former Miss West Virginia, and their 2 children, 9-year-old Burke and 6-year-old JonBenét, had returned to their sprawling 15-room Tudor home after a party. JonBenét, a charismatic child known for her participation in beauty pageants, had fallen asleep in the car and was carried to bed by her father. The house on 15th Street settled into a quiet that would soon be irrevocably shattered. Outside, a neighbor reported being awakened shortly after midnight by the sound of a child's scream. Based on the state of the body when it was later found, the time of death was estimated to have occurred between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 6 a.m. on December 26th. At approximately 5:30 a.m. on December 26th, Patsy Ramsey awoke and made her way to the kitchen. On a spiral staircase, she discovered a 2.5-page handwritten letter. The note was alarming and bizarre. It claimed that JonBenét had been kidnapped by a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction, and demanded a ransom of $118,000 for her safe return, a sum nearly identical to a recent bonus John had received. The author warned against contacting the police, threatening that if they did, JonBenét would be beheaded. After finding her daughter's room empty, Patsy Ramsey, in a state of panic, disregarded the warning and placed a frantic 911 call at 5:52 a.m. Police officers arrived at the home within 7 minutes. The initial law enforcement response was not merely flawed, it was fundamentally misaligned with the potential gravity of the crime. The Boulder Police Department, a force with little experience in homicide investigations, operated under the assumption that they were managing a kidnapping. This conceptual error led to a cascade of procedural failures from which the investigation would never fully recover. Standard protocol for a potential homicide requires the immediate and total securing of the premises. Instead, the Ramsey home remained largely unsecured. Friends and family of the Ramseys were permitted to enter the house, move about freely, offer comfort, and even clean surfaces, creating an environment ripe for the destruction and contamination of forensic evidence. The initial search of the house by the first responding officer was cursory. He surveyed the home but did not open the latch door to a small wine cellar in the basement, a room that would later prove to be the epicenter of the crime. Furthermore, John and Patsy Ramsey were not separated and formally interviewed, a critical failure to secure independent, untainted statements from the 2 primary witnesses in the first hours. As the morning wore on, the kidnappers' promised phone call, which the note stated would come before 10 a.m., never materialized. At approximately 1 p.m., Boulder Police Detective Linda Arndt, who was on the scene, made a decision that would have catastrophic consequences. She suggested that John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White conduct a top-to-bottom search of the house themselves. This delegation of a critical police function to civilians, particularly the victim's father, represented an almost unbelievable breakdown in investigative protocol. John Ramsey went directly to the basement. There, he opened the door to the wine cellar that had been overlooked hours earlier. Inside, he found the body of his 6-year-old daughter, covered by a white blanket. Overcome with grief, he immediately removed a strip of duct tape from her mouth and carried her body upstairs into the living room. This act, while an understandable parental response, irretrievably contaminated the crime scene. It moved the most critical piece of evidence, the body, from its original context, potentially destroying trace evidence and obscuring the true sequence of events. The kidnapping investigation was instantly transformed into a homicide, one that was now forensically and narratively chaotic due to the actions taken, and not taken, in those first crucial hours. The stage was set for a mystery that would consume millions of dollars, divide experts, and captivate the world for decades, all while the question of true justice and the real story behind the family's economy and wealth remained shrouded in the darkness of that Boulder basement. The physical evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey case does not tell a single, coherent story. Rather, it presents two powerful but incompatible narratives. This inherent contradiction is the primary reason the case has remained a subject of intense debate and speculation for decades. An objective analysis of each piece of evidence reveals a complex puzzle where items found within the home point toward an internal staging, while other forensic traces suggest the presence of an unknown outsider. The 2.5-page ransom note is one of the most peculiar and debated pieces of evidence in modern criminal history. It was written on a legal pad that belonged to the Ramseys, with a Sharpie pen also found inside the house. This internal origin immediately fueled suspicion that the note was staged. The demand for $118,000 was also highly suspect. The amount was nearly identical to a year-end bonus John Ramsey had recently received from his employer, Access Graphics, suggesting the author had intimate knowledge of the family's finances and economic situation. The note's length and rambling, theatrical tone, claiming to be from a small foreign faction and filled with quotes from movies like Dirty Harry, were uncharacteristic of authentic ransom demands, which are typically brief and direct. Handwriting analysis conducted by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and other experts eliminated John Ramsey and more than 70 other individuals as the author, but the results for Patsy Ramsey were inconclusive. Experts could neither definitively identify her as the writer nor rule her out. For the Boulder police, the note was the cornerstone of their theory that the kidnapping was a hoax designed to cover up a murder committed by a family member. JonBenét Ramsey was strangled with a makeshift garrote. The device was constructed from a length of nylon cord tied to a broken wooden handle from one of Patsy Ramsey's paintbrushes. The brush end was later found in a container with Patsy's other art supplies, though the top third of the handle used for the garrote was never recovered from the home. A similar white cord was tied loosely around her right wrist. The intricate knots used to fashion the garrote were noted by some experts as suggesting a specialized knowledge, such as that held by a sailor. This observation led investigators to consider John Ramsey, who was an experienced yachtsman. The use of materials sourced from within the house further supported the theory of an inside job. The official autopsy, performed by the Boulder County Coroner's Office, determined the cause of death to be asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. JonBenét had suffered a massive 8.5-inch fracture to the right side of her skull, the result of a powerful blow from a blunt object. The coroner was unable to determine whether the head blow or the strangulation occurred first. The examination also revealed evidence of sexual assault. There were abrasions and injuries to her vaginal area, but no semen was found, and the area appeared to have been wiped with a cloth. One of the most significant findings from the autopsy was the presence of undigested pineapple in her small intestine. This indicated that she had consumed the fruit only a few hours before her death. This piece of evidence directly contradicted the statements made by John and Patsy Ramsey, who maintained that JonBenét had gone straight to bed after they returned home and had not eaten anything. A bowl of pineapple with a spoon in it was later found on a table in the home. Fingerprints belonging to both Patsy and Burke were identified on the bowl. Yet, simultaneously, another set of clues pointed away from the family. The most powerful piece of evidence suggesting an unknown perpetrator was the discovery of foreign DNA. Trace amounts of DNA from an unidentified male were found in a drop of blood in JonBenét's underwear and under her fingernails. This profile, which came to be known as Unknown Male 1, was tested against samples from family members and was found not to match John, Patsy, or Burke Ramsey. Years later, advanced touch DNA analysis would identify the same male profile on the waistband of the long johns JonBenét was wearing. This DNA evidence forms the forensic backbone of the intruder theory. Further evidence supporting an intruder included several unidentified marks. A partial boot print was found in the dust of the wine cellar floor near JonBenét's body. The print was identified as coming from a high-tech brand hiking boot, a type of shoe that did not belong to any member of the Ramsey family. The physical state of the Ramsey home presented its own set of conflicting clues. Proponents of the intruder theory pointed to a broken window in the basement as a plausible point of entry. A suitcase was found positioned directly beneath this window, suggesting it could have been used as a step. However, police investigators who examined the window well from the outside noted an undisturbed spiderweb on the grate, casting doubt on whether the window had been recently used. The collection of evidence, therefore, established the central and enduring conflict of the investigation. A set of clues, the note, the garrote, the pineapple, created a compelling, self-contained narrative of a crime staged from within the family home. Simultaneously, another set of clues, the foreign DNA, the boot print, the broken window, created an equally compelling narrative of a violent intrusion by an unknown assailant. These two stories cannot logically coexist. Any viable theory of the crime must not only explain the evidence that supports it, but also convincingly account for the evidence that directly contradicts it. The intractability of the JonBenét Ramsey case stems from the fact that, for decades, no theory has ever successfully reconciled both sets of forensic facts. What do you think so far? Does the evidence point inside the house or to an intruder? Let us know your theory in the comments below. The forensic paradoxes of the JonBenét Ramsey case were exacerbated by a profound institutional schism that plagued the investigation from its earliest days. The conflict between the Boulder Police Department and the Boulder County District Attorney's Office was not merely a professional disagreement over leads. It was a fundamental divergence in investigative philosophy that created two parallel competing inquiries. This internal division, marked by mistrust and public disputes, ultimately ensured that no single, unified theory of the crime could be effectively pursued. From the outset, the Boulder Police Department developed a strong working theory that the crime was an inside job, staged by the parents to cover up the murder of their daughter. Key investigators became convinced that the evidence pointed overwhelmingly toward family involvement. They viewed the highly unusual ransom note as a clumsy work of fiction, the use of household items for the murder weapon as proof of staging, and the parents' behavior in the aftermath as suspicious and uncooperative. This conviction became a powerful lens through which the BPD interpreted all subsequent evidence, a dynamic often described as tunnel vision. The department's focus on the Ramseys was so intense that it was criticized for its early rejection of assistance from more experienced agencies like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which may have brought a broader perspective to the case. In stark contrast, the district attorney's office, led by Alex Hunter, adopted a more cautious and skeptical stance regarding the family's guilt. Hunter and his team of investigators, which included the respected retired detective Lou Smith, remained open to the possibility that an intruder had committed the crime. They believed the BPD was too quick to dismiss exculpatory evidence, such as the unidentified DNA, and was failing to pursue legitimate leads outside the family. This philosophical divide festered into open conflict, with leaks to the press and public disagreements creating an atmosphere of deep-seated mistrust between the two agencies legally responsible for bringing JonBenét's killer to justice. Caught in the middle, John and Patsy Ramsey made a series of decisions that would profoundly shape the public and official perception of their role. On the advice of counsel, they retained separate defense lawyers and private investigators to conduct their own inquiry. Their communication with the BPD became highly structured and was largely conducted through their legal representatives. This approach, combined with their participation in high-profile television interviews, was interpreted by the police and a large segment of the public as evasiveness, obstruction, and a sign of guilt. The Ramseys and their supporters maintained that they were simply exercising their legal rights in the face of a biased and hostile investigation that had prematurely labeled them as killers. The couple did not sit for formal, separate police interrogations until April 30, 1997, more than 4 months after their daughter's murder. Suspicion fell most heavily on Patsy Ramsey, primarily due to the ransom note. As the person who discovered the note, and as someone whom handwriting experts could not definitively exclude as its author, she became the central figure in the police's theory. The fact that the note was written on a pad from her kitchen with a pen found in the house was seen as damning evidence of its staged nature. The garrote, constructed with the handle from one of her own paintbrushes, further tied her to the murder weapon. Investigators also pointed to fiber evidence, claiming that fibers consistent with a red jacket she owned were found on the garrote, the duct tape, the blanket covering the body, and in the paint tray where the broken brush was found. An early, though speculative, motive was proposed by police: that Patsy, perhaps in a fit of rage over a bedwetting incident, had struck her daughter and then, with John's help, orchestrated the elaborate cover-up to protect herself. John Ramsey came under suspicion for several reasons. His immediate action upon discovering his daughter's body, moving her from the basement and removing the duct tape from her mouth, was a critical error that severely compromised the integrity of the crime scene. While this could be interpreted as the panicked action of a grieving father, investigators viewed it as a possible attempt to destroy evidence. The specific ransom amount demanded in the note, $118,000, was almost exactly the value of a bonus he had recently received, suggesting inside knowledge that an external kidnapper was unlikely to possess. Finally, some investigators theorized that his background as an experienced sailor could explain the complex knots used in the garrote, a skill not commonly held by the general public. For years, JonBenét's older brother, Burke, who was 9 at the time of the murder, was not considered a primary suspect by authorities. However, a theory that he was the perpetrator gained significant public traction, most notably after a 2016 television docuseries. This theory posits that Burke accidentally killed his sister in a flash of anger, and that his parents then staged the entire kidnapping and murder scene to protect their surviving child. The evidence supporting this theory is highly interpretive. Proponents point to the bowl of pineapple found in the kitchen, which had Burke's fingerprints on it. The theory speculates that JonBenét took a piece of pineapple from her brother's bowl, provoking him to strike her on the head with a heavy flashlight, causing the fatal skull fracture. This theory, however, is contradicted by significant forensic evidence. Burke's DNA and handwriting samples did not match any evidence recovered from the crime scene. He was officially cleared as a suspect by the district attorney's office in 1999 and was included in the family's formal exoneration in 2008. This dynamic created a destructive feedback loop. The BPD's early conviction of the Ramseys' guilt led to an adversarial posture. This posture, in turn, prompted the Ramseys to seek legal protection and limit their direct cooperation with the police. This legally protected behavior was then interpreted by the BPD as further confirmation of their guilt, causing them to double down on their theory and arguably neglect other investigative avenues. The system designed to uncover the truth devolved into a self-perpetuating cycle of accusation and defense. The case was not just unsolved, it was actively undermined by the fractured relationship between the investigators and the central figures in the crime, leaving the question of who truly benefited from this chaos, and the potential financial and reputational ruin it averted, lingering in the air. As public pressure mounted and the police investigation remained fixated on the Ramsey family, the legal system took a monumental step. In September 1998, Boulder District Attorney Alex Hunter convened a grand jury, a panel of 12 citizens tasked with determining if there was enough evidence to indict someone for the murder of JonBenét Ramsey. For 13 months, this secret body heard testimony from dozens of witnesses and reviewed thousands of pages of evidence, far more than what was available to the public or the media. The world watched, expecting a definitive conclusion. In October 1999, the grand jury concluded its work. To the public, it appeared the case had hit a dead end. DA Alex Hunter held a press conference and announced that no charges would be filed, stating, "I and my prosecutorial team believe we do not have sufficient evidence to warrant the filing of charges against anyone who has been investigated at this time." For over a decade, this was the accepted narrative. The grand jury had heard the evidence and chosen not to indict. The case, it seemed, was effectively closed. However, a stunning revelation in 2013 would shatter this perception and rewrite the legal history of the case. A lawsuit by a journalist forced the release of the long-sealed grand jury documents, and the truth emerged. The grand jury had, in fact, voted to indict. They had not remained silent. They had spoken, and their message was damning. The grand jury voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey on 2 counts each. The first count was for child abuse resulting in death. The indictment alleged that the parents did unlawfully, knowingly, recklessly, and feloniously permit a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation which posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in the death of JonBenét Ramsey. This charge did not accuse them of dealing the fatal blow, but of creating the circumstances that led to her death. The second count was even more explosive: accessory to a crime. It accused John and Patsy Ramsey of knowingly rendering assistance to a person with intent to hinder, delay, or prevent the discovery, detection, apprehension, prosecution, conviction, and punishment of such person for the commission of a crime, namely first-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. This charge implied that the grand jury believed the parents were protecting someone else, the person who actually killed JonBenét. This created a legal and narrative earthquake. Why had this indictment been kept secret? The answer lies in the immense power of the district attorney. Alex Hunter, as the lead prosecutor, had the ultimate authority to sign the indictment and proceed to trial. Faced with the grand jury's decision, he refused. His team concluded that while the evidence may have met the lower probable cause standard for an indictment, it fell far short of the beyond a reasonable doubt standard required to win a conviction at trial. Hunter believed that the unidentified male DNA, the contaminated crime scene, and the lack of a clear, direct forensic link to the parents would make a successful prosecution impossible. An acquittal, he feared, would forever bar any future prosecution under double jeopardy laws. This created the ultimate legal paradox of the case. A panel of citizens, after a year of secret testimony, concluded there was enough evidence to formally accuse the parents of enabling their daughter's death and then protecting her killer. Yet the chief prosecutor, looking at the same evidence through the lens of a trial, believed it was too weak to secure a conviction. This was not a case with no suspects. It was a case with too much contradictory evidence to proceed. The secret indictment left the case in a state of suspended animation. It validated the police's long-held theory of family involvement in a cover-up, giving them a form of vindication. Yet, by remaining unsigned, it also validated the DA's office's caution and their focus on the intruder theory, supported by the DNA. The schism was now encoded in the official legal record. The Ramseys, for their part, maintained their innocence, arguing that the grand jury process was tainted by the biased information presented by the police. The secret indictment became a ghost haunting the case, an official finding of probable cause that, due to the complex realities of evidence and the high stakes of the family's wealth and reputation, would never have its day in court. For years, the JonBenét Ramsey case was a battle of competing narratives. The Boulder police's theory of a staged cover-up versus the district attorney's lingering doubts and the family's insistence on an intruder. But as the 21st century progressed, a silent scientific witness began to speak with increasing clarity, threatening to overturn the entire foundation of the investigation. This witness was DNA. From the earliest stages, DNA evidence pointed away from the immediate family. Initial tests on a small spot of blood found inside JonBenét's underwear and on biological material, recovered from beneath her fingernails, yielded a partial profile of an unknown male. This profile, designated Unknown Male 1, was compared against samples from John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey, and all were definitively excluded as contributors. Despite the exculpatory nature of this finding, its significance was initially downplayed by investigators convinced of the family's guilt, who argued it could be the result of contamination, or was simply unrelated to the murder. The case might have remained stagnant were it not for a forensic revolution. The advent of touch DNA technology allowed scientists to analyze minute skin cells left behind when an object is handled. In 2008, under the direction of new Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey, the long johns JonBenét was wearing during the murder were subjected to this new, sophisticated testing. The results were dramatic. The analysis revealed a partial male DNA profile on the waistband of the long johns. Crucially, this new profile was consistent with the original Unknown Male 1 DNA found in her underwear and under her fingernails years earlier. The presence of the same unknown male's DNA on two separate items of the victim's clothing, from two different locations on her body, was a powerful corroboration. It made the possibility of incidental transfer or contamination at the factory vastly less likely. This was, prosecutors now argued, the genetic signature of the killer. Based on this new evidence, District Attorney Mary Lacey took the extraordinary step no one had anticipated. She issued a formal public letter of exoneration to the Ramsey family. The letter stated that the DNA evidence cleared John, his late wife Patsy, and their son Burke. To the extent that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime, I am deeply sorry, Lacey wrote. The Ramseys, after more than a decade of living under a cloud of intense suspicion, were now officially designated as victims of the crime. This was a landmark moment that fundamentally shifted the case's trajectory. However, Lacey's exoneration was not universally accepted. Critics, including some former prosecutors and forensic experts, argued she had overstepped. They contended that the DNA mixtures were complex and could include genetic material from multiple individuals, and that the presence of trace DNA did not definitively prove the individual was the murderer. They pointed out that the DNA could have been transferred innocently at any point, an argument about the economy of evidence that questioned its ultimate value. Despite the controversy, the unknown male 1 profile became the case's most promising lead. It was entered into the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, a national database of convicted offenders. For years, it yielded no matches, but the science continued to advance. In recent years, the focus has shifted to forensic genetic genealogy, the groundbreaking technique used to identify the Golden State Killer. This method involves uploading a crime scene DNA profile to public genealogy databases to find distant relatives of the perpetrator, then using traditional genealogical research to build a family tree and zero in on a suspect. Jon Ramsey has become a vocal public advocate, tirelessly urging the Boulder police to employ this technique. The Boulder Police Department has stated the investigation remains open and active, and that they are evaluating new forensic technologies. In late 2023, the department announced a collaboration with the Colorado Cold Case Review Team and a massive project to digitize the entire case file. Yet the Ramsey family has expressed frustration with the pace, perceiving a lack of urgency in applying the very tool that could finally give a name to unknown male 1. The DNA evidence, once a cryptic clue, is now the central hope for resolution. It exonerated a family, divided experts, and now holds the potential to finally solve a decades-old mystery. The question is no longer just about what happened in that basement, but whether the will and the resources exist to follow the scientific trail to its end, potentially revealing a truth that could shatter all previous assumptions about the case, the investigation, and the very nature of the crime itself. Nearly 3 decades after her death, the murder of JonBenét Ramsey remains one of the most haunting and intractable unsolved homicides in American history. The case is not a mystery for lack of clues, but for a surplus of contradictory evidence that fuels 2 powerful, mutually exclusive narratives. The path to justice was obstructed from its first moments by a cascade of investigative failures, compounded by institutional conflict and an unprecedented media frenzy. The result is a case trapped in a state of perpetual ambiguity, a legal and forensic stalemate that has left a family shattered and a nation captivated by a tragedy with no resolution. The opportunity for a clear and successful investigation was likely lost within the first hours of December 26, 1996. The failure of the Boulder Police Department to secure the Ramsey home as a crime scene led to irreversible contamination of physical evidence. The decision to allow the victim's father to discover and move the body was a catastrophic breach of protocol that compromised the most critical evidence in the case. These initial errors, born of inexperience and a misreading of the situation, created a foundation of forensic uncertainty from which the investigation could never recover. This was exacerbated by the deep and public schism between the police department, which was convinced of the family's guilt, and the district attorney's office, which remained open to the possibility of an intruder. This conflict prevented a unified investigative strategy and fostered an environment of mistrust that further hampered the search for truth. At its core, the JonBenét Ramsey case is a war of 2 narratives. The first, pursued by the police, points to a crime staged from within. It is built upon the bizarre and personalized ransom note written on a family notepad, the murder weapon fashioned from the mother's art supplies, and the pineapple in the victim's stomach that contradicted the parents' timeline. The second narrative, championed by the family and eventually the DA's office, points to a violent intruder. It is built upon the most powerful scientific evidence in the case, the unidentified male DNA found on multiple items of JonBenét's clothing, corroborated by an unmatched boot print and other foreign items at the scene. Neither narrative has ever been able to convincingly explain away the evidence that supports the other. The case remains unsolved not because there is no evidence, but because the evidence is profoundly paradoxical. Today, the murder of JonBenét Ramsey is an open but cold investigation. The passage of time has seen memories fade, witnesses move on, and a key figure, Patsy Ramsey, pass away. Yet a faint but persistent hope for a resolution endures, and it lies almost entirely within the microscopic strands of DNA from unknown male 1. The advent of forensic genetic genealogy offers a tangible path forward, a scientific method capable of giving a name to the ghost that has haunted this case for decades. The recent involvement of the Colorado Cold Case Review Team and the ongoing efforts by Jon Ramsey to compel the use of this technology signal that while the case is cold, it is not entirely dormant. Until a DNA match is made, or a long-held secret is confessed. The death of JonBenét Ramsey will remain what the Boulder police chief once called it, an unspeakable crime and a deep, unsettled wound in the American psyche. The search for answers continues. If you have any information, no matter how small, you could hold the key to solving this decades-old mystery. Share this video to keep the case alive and subscribe to Lost Traces for more deep dives into the world's most compelling unsolved crimes.